15 years ago. Dane Reynolds walked away from $3.5 million a year, a fan base that worshipped him, and a world title almost everyone in surfing assumed was already his. For over a decade, that was the whole story. The reluctant genius, the guy who hated fame and vanished on his own terms, disappearing into a quiet life nobody was supposed to question. Then, in the spring of 2026, Dane sat down across from another surfer with a couple of beers and a microphone, and said something he had never said publicly in 15 years of interviews. He admitted he was jealous of a teammate. He admitted he was ungrateful for the biggest opportunity of his career. What nobody knew was why he'd stayed quiet about it for so long, and what finally changed.
I claim waves all the time as a joke. I probably gave a little show of satisfaction fairly recently. I don't know when though.
Nobody was paying much attention to a 40-year-old former surfer running a t-shirt shop in Ventura. Dane had spent almost a decade being politely filed away by the surf media under "quit the tour, make surf films now, seems happy." That description wasn't wrong exactly. It just wasn't the whole story. And in 2026, that was about to change in a way nobody saw coming.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird how I kind of grew into this. Initially, I just was picturing surf videos on the internet, you know?
Quick recap for anyone who missed the first act, because this part still matters. Dane turned pro at 17 when Quiksilver signed him off the back of a 5 NSSA regional title run. And by 2010, he was ranked 4th in the world, pulling in close to $300,000 a month. He surfed like he was actively trying to break his board in half, and fans couldn't look away. Then the panic attacks started. He was calling his girlfriend from the water, telling her he thought he was dying. He locked himself inside his house for months while earning nearly $300,000 monthly, unable to walk into a grocery store without his heart racing. On December 20th, 2011, at 26 years old, he posted a letter online and walked off the tour for good, describing himself in his own words as wasted talent and blown potential.
Sun cracks open on the Gold Coast line. Crowd stacked deep where the points unwind. Snapper growling with a 6-foot grin. No king paddles out, let the war begin.
What came after that letter is where most people stopped paying attention. Marine Layer Productions, the raw, unbranded video platform that pioneered the whole surfer as independent creator model years before YouTube vlogging took over surfing. The dumpster diver board, drawn on a post-it note, that rewired what an entire generation of everyday surfers rode. Chapter 11, his own brand and eventually his own shop on South Palm Street. A quiet, stable life in Carpinteria with his wife Courtney and 3 kids. Case closed, as far as the public was concerned. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. Dane never actually explained why he was so afraid of winning. For 15 years, he talked around it in interviews. Vague lines about pressure, about hating the tour lifestyle, about needing to protect his own headspace. Journalists would ask and he'd deflect with a joke or a shrug. He never said the actual thing. Until now. The same silence that made Dane Reynolds a legend was about to be the exact thing he broke on purpose. In early 2026, Dane started showing up on a new podcast called Stab Mic, recorded in the back of his own surf shop with a couple of microphones somebody else paid for. It started almost as a joke. Nobody could agree on a name for the show, and the rejected options were somehow worse than whatever they eventually landed on. But something happened across those episodes that hadn't happened in 15 years of press. Dane started actually answering the question everyone had been asking since 2011. Why did he really leave? He said it plainly, no mystique attached. He wasn't pissed off at John Florence. John rules, he said. But it aided him how fast John connected with an audience, how easily people loved him. When Dane had spent a decade being called the most talented surfer alive and still felt invisible in the room half the time. He called it a jealous thing, in those exact words. No poetic framing, just the plain admission, sitting there in front of a microphone he didn't have to be sitting in front of. And that's not even the part that got people talking. Dane went further than that. He said he was just an idiot back then, that he wouldn't do anything if he thought it was whack, no matter what it cost him, that he was ungrateful, full stop, for a contract most surfers on tour would have given up everything for. Money didn't mean anything to him in his 20s, he said. Quiksilver handed him whatever he wanted, and his honest reaction, more often than not, was some version of an attitude he spent years being embarrassed about since. Pro surfing, he added, doesn't exactly set you up for humility. Read that again because it's the opposite of the myth fans built for him. For 15 years, people painted Dane as the enlightened one, the surfer too pure for the corporate machine, the guy who saw through the industry before anyone else did. Turns out the guy himself thinks that story gives him way more credit than he deserves. He wasn't the only one revisiting old ground either. On a separate episode, Dane sat down with Jordy Smith to pick apart what he called their media-manufactured rivalry, a storyline surf magazines pushed hard back in the 2000s that neither of them ever actually felt. Two guys who respected each other turned into rivals for a headline. And on another, Taj Burrow got him talking about getting older in a sport built entirely around youth, the Paris Hilton era of surfing, as Dane put it, where being famous mattered more than being good. He said something there too that stuck. Famous people, rich people, they're the loneliest. It's isolating. Coming from a guy who spent a decade avoiding exactly that kind of spotlight, it landed differently than it would from anyone else. If a story like this is the kind of thing you want more of, hit subscribe, because we cover a different surfer every week who the mainstream surf world completely underestimated. Enter Hunter Martinez, Dane's longtime filmmaker, the guy who has been standing next to him with a camera for almost 15 years. And in early 2026, Hunter said something in a separate interview that explains what was actually going on behind all those quiet years running the shop. For a while, things actually seemed fine. Dane had the shop, the family, the businesses. Former, the brand he co-founded with Craig Anderson and skate legends Austin Gillette and Dylan Reeder, was growing. Monera signed him for wetsuits, a deal Dane says he chose specifically because it was small and family-owned, the opposite of the corporate machine he walked away from in 2011. That didn't last as the full picture because underneath it, Hunter says, Dane had basically stopped surfing on camera altogether. The last real footage came during a Vans film years earlier, and after that, almost nothing. Business and family had taken over completely, and the surf world assumed that was just how the story ended. And that wasn't even the part that got people worried. Chapter 11. TV. The channel Dane started to give the next generation of surfers a platform the way magazines once gave him one, was starting to feel exactly like the algorithm-chasing content Dane had spent his entire career trying to avoid. Hunter admitted it outright in an interview. A lot of these YouTube videos, the ones that come out every single week, are kind of brainless, he said. You watch one, and immediately after, you can't even remember what you just saw. So in 2026, Dane and Hunter made a call. Fewer uploads, longer, better ones. Editorial storytelling instead of weekly filler content nobody retains. And then footage nobody expected started leaking out online. Dane, in Puerto Rico, testing waves for Former's biggest project in years, a feature film called Defect. Even his own team seemed shocked by how good it looked. Post-session, beer in hand, Dane's honest review of his own performance was something like, "Even with no competition on the line, I still couldn't pick a good one." The footage told a completely different story than the one he was telling himself. This wasn't B-roll for some other project. It was Dane, rejuvenated and young again, exactly the way Hunter described it. Not on the back end, still able to perform. If that sounds like classic Dane self-deprecation, keep watching, because it's actually the whole point. This is a guy who spent 15 years being called the best surfer to never win a world title. And even now, mid-comeback, dropping clips that make the entire surf world stop scrolling and pay attention, he still can't fully accept that he's good at this. Any Dane Reynolds footage, even now, gets torn apart online like people have been starving for weeks. On June 15th, 2026, Defect premiered in Ventura. 1,000 beers, a giveaway, a literal derby car parked outside the venue. Dane Reynolds, the man who once blacked out his own sponsor logos with a Sharpie rather than sell one more product for a company, stood in a room full of people watching him surf again, on his own terms, for the first time in years. It was, by every account, the biggest night Chapter 11 and Former had ever put together. The Surfer's Journal put it best in a recent feature. A different Dane has begun appearing, they wrote. Someone more accessible than he's ever been before. Not the ghost who disappeared in 2011. Not the reluctant icon fans spent a decade mythologizing into something he never actually claimed to be. Someone more honest, willing to actually say the uncomfortable thing into a microphone, instead of letting 15 years of silence do the talking for him. At 40 years old, Dane Reynolds finally said the thing that a decade and a half of interviews never managed to get out of him. He wasn't a monk who saw through the industry before everyone else did. He was a young guy who was scared, jealous, and ungrateful, who got lucky enough to build something real only once he stopped pretending otherwise. And the version of him that's back in the water right now, testing boards for a film he's actually proud of, only exists because he was willing to say all of that out loud first. Kelly Slater won 11 world titles. Dane Reynolds won 0. But as of today, Dane is still the one handing out board designs that change what an entire generation rides, still dropping clips the internet tears apart like it's been starving. Still, at 40 years old, admitting things about himself that most retired athletes never say out loud at any age. The comeback was never really about the surfing. Defect just proved that. It was about a guy who spent a decade being praised for a myth he never actually believed, finally telling the truth about who he really was. Whether Chapter 11 TV keeps growing, whether the next film hits bigger than the last, one thing is already certain: Dane Reynolds still isn't done talking.